or the top of your Zoom window, depending on how you have that set up. So feel free to post things in the chat and we will relay those during the session. And we will have some time at the end as well. So I'd like to start by introducing myself. Melinda Stanley here, and my role here on the KanREN team is to coordinate these types of professional learning and outreach opportunities for members. And I work with Kansas community anchors across the state to raise awareness about the awesomeness of being part of the KanREN consortium. So that's a little bit about what I do. For those of you that are participating that may not be familiar with KanREN, we are the Kansas Research and Education Network, the only organization of its kind in Kansas, created in 1992 in conjunction with Kansas higher education institutions to bring the internet and a robust cyber infrastructure to our state. So it was created with the intent of enabling members to connect to the internet, to the world of research and education institutions. And we continue to evolve the state's cyber infrastructure and are highly involved in the national research and education network community, working on things within the state and within that R&E community that primarily are driven by the needs of our members: higher education, K-12 education, municipalities, libraries, hospitals. Our work is really driven by what our members need us to do for them. So that's one of the reasons why we're here today. Our members are continually warding off these advanced targeted threats, the malware, phishing, and ransomware, which is escalating. And part of the challenge is how to help protect your end users from those threats. So we're excited to share the DNS security filtering solution with you. This is something that KanREN has, as in any service that we bring to our membership, invested time and resource in trying to figure out what the best solution is, and working with the R&E community across the country. We're confident that the Akamai Enterprise Threat Protector is something that will not only help our members and potential non-members with reducing those threats and risks, but also be something that's cost effective for their institutions, because that, as you know, is a real challenge for folks. One of the things that we won't be doing today is talking about pricing. Pricing will vary depending on whether you're a member or not and whether you're connected or not. So we will be glad to provide pricing information for folks, but that's not something that we will get into on this webinar today. Ram has graciously, Ram Cholin from Akamai is this solutions engineer, and he has graciously agreed to help folks become more familiar with the product and what DNS security filtering can do for your organization. So I want to introduce him and thank you, Ram, for being with us today, and turn it over to Ram to get into the meat of why we're all here.
Thanks, Melinda. Good morning, everyone. My name is Ram Cholin. I'm a solutions engineer with Akamai. I work with state and local government agencies, as well as customers in the education space, universities, colleges, school districts. And so in today's webinar, I'll walk you through a quick introduction of Akamai and jump to our DNS security filtering service, which is called Enterprise Threat Protector, and also give you a demo of the user interface, how to configure it, as well as how to use it for monitoring. As Melinda mentioned, if you have any questions along the way, please type in the chat window, and we'll address it. And I'll make sure we have enough time at the end to address any questions that you have. So Akamai, what we do is we make the internet fast, reliable, and secure. We pioneered the content delivery network space, and we actually celebrated our 20th anniversary. And there are some of the stats of a company you see there in terms of customers and employees. If you look at our customer base, we have customers in all verticals. 1 out of every 3 Fortune 500 company is a customer. We have customers in the government space, the financial sector, e-commerce, and the benefit of being an Akamai customer is that our customers, when they're attacked, so we are able to use that information, find the new vulnerabilities that are happening in the internet, and use that data to protect our customer base. So all our customers are mutually getting benefited on that. We started as a CDN provider, but we've evolved into a cloud security service provider. And we've been able to consistently deliver services in the space that we pioneered, and we've been able to grow alongside the growth of the internet. So what Enterprise Threat Protector offers is protection for your users, students, faculty, employees against threats in the internet, such as malware, ransomware, phishing, and DNS-based data exfiltration. I'm sure you all know that the volume, prevalence, and sophistication of targeted attacks are increasing exponentially. I read a stat that says that there are about 390,000 new malware variants which are released every day. So it's a huge challenge for organizations to protect their employees and IT infrastructure against these attacks. With this service, you'll be able to protect your users against these targeted threats. This is the architecture, and DNS stands for Domain Name System, and it's essentially the starting point of everything on the internet. You can think of it as the phone book. What it does is it translates host names into IP addresses, which are routable across the internet. And this protocol inherently is open and unfiltered. It doesn't have the intelligence to distinguish between safe and malicious domains. So with this service, what we've done, on top of the recursive DNS service, we've built a cloud security intelligence. So if a request is going to a malicious domain, we can block it at the DNS layer. Along with this, you'll have full visibility into your DNS traffic using our cloud-based management portal, which I'll show you during the demo. With this, so on the left, you have your office, like essentially your network. All you have to do is point your outgoing DNS queries to Akamai, and with that, we'll be able to offer real-time protection against threats in the internet, such as malware, command and control, phishing, ransomware, as well as enforce an acceptable use policy. There's no hardware involved here. It's pretty much a 100% cloud-based solution. And in a matter of minutes, you will be able to get up and running and offer protection for your user base. So to talk about where this protection comes into play and which part of the kill chain it impacts, more than 90% of malware use DNS at some stage in their life cycle. Threat actors, they use DNS at some stage to stay anonymous, so to have protection from law enforcement. And they use different evasion techniques to stay anonymous. So if someone's trying to manually blacklist a specific domain, they spin up hundreds and thousands of domains in a matter of minutes and use those newly created domains to launch attacks. So having a manual approach to block these domains is a very, very challenging task. So let's talk about the first phase, the delivery phase. For example, let's say one of your faculty or user gets a phishing email, and unknowingly, if they click on that, the first thing that happens is it involves a DNS lookup. And if it's going to a phishing domain, we will not resolve the DNS query and block the traffic at the beginning stage. And this also applies to someone accessing a malware on a website which has been affected. So we can protect the malware from being downloaded to the endpoint and potentially spreading throughout your network. If you look at command and control, the next phase, if the malware gets installed in your endpoint, the first thing it does, it calls out to external command and control service. So someone out there, the bad actor out in the internet, will be able to remotely control the machine, potentially steal information, and use that machine for nefarious actions. Especially in the local government space, we've seen an interesting case where instead of focusing on trying to collect ransomware, there's a malware called CoinHive, which is essentially using the computers to mine Bitcoin, use the computing power to mine Bitcoin, and even without the owners knowing about it, they are able to use the computing and make money off it. So this will make, for the end user, the computers will slow down because their resources are being used for a different version. And the last one is DNS-based data exfiltration. It's a different threat vector. We've seen that attackers are using DNS because unlike other applications like web applications or FTP, DNS is not heavily inspected or monitored by IT administrators. So they use this to essentially steal information, such as PII data. They inject it into DNS payload and extract the data. With this service, we can essentially offer protection across the kill chain from a delivery, command and control, as well as DNS-based exfiltration standpoint. So if you look at the challenge, every day, millions of new domains are created. So it's a huge challenge to identify which ones are malicious and which ones are benign. So what we do is we use our cloud security intelligence. We use a combination of it along with artificial intelligence, machine learning, and dedicated threat research team to identify the malicious domains. And when we built the service, our focus was on the accuracy of it, as well as the relevance of threats to provide very low false positives. We know that a lot of universities and research institutions, the last thing they want to do is block a legitimate user request. That could affect productivity, cause frustration among your user base, and also your help desk have to work on it and essentially allow those sites. So when we built it, our goal was to be highly accurate. The way we do that is our visibility into global web traffic as well as DNS traffic. We serve about 15 to 30% of web traffic on a daily basis. So this is in the order of 30 terabits per second to 60 terabits per second. From a DNS standpoint, we cover about 2.2 trillion DNS queries every day. And this is an order of magnitude more visibility than any other provider. So the data that we have in our cloud security intelligence is augmented with additional DNS data that we receive from our carrier partners and external threat feeds. The combined data is analyzed using real-time behavioral analysis and our own proprietary algorithms. And the data is further enhanced by our dedicated threat research team. So it's a combination of it. And we use both real-time and offline behavioral analysis to improve accuracy and block the malicious domains. On top of that, we also use publicly available information such as who-is and registrar data. For example, if a domain has been registered like 10 minutes ago, it has a higher risk factor than a domain that's been around for 10 years. So we take all of these multiple factors into consideration and feed it into our cloud security intelligence. On top of the DNS-based protection, very recently, we have introduced our 2.0 version, which has a proxy capability. So with this, what we do is when the suspicious domains, so the bad domains, we block at the DNS layer. The safe domains, we allow it through. But the domains that are suspicious, we route it through our cloud-based proxy platform, and we do additional analysis. So this gives more information on how the traffic flow happens and the multiple layers of protection we have. The first layer is the plain DNS layer. We block the bad domains and we allow the good domains. The suspicious domains go to the second layer of security, where we look at the URL. Certain domains may have only a few URLs that are malicious, and the majority of the URLs may be safe. So we block only the malicious URLs and allow the safe ones to go through. And the third layer of protection is we do payload analysis. What happens is the traffic gets routed through multiple inline malware detection engines, and we analyze. So this also includes documents. So PDFs and Word documents, they are a very popular threat vector to launch malware. We download the document in a sandbox, we inspect the traffic. If it has any malicious content, we'll block it. If it's safe, we'll pass it through to the end user. So to summarize, with this service, you get security, control, and visibility. From a security standpoint, it significantly improves your defenses by proactively blocking DNS requests based on a unique and up-to-date threat intelligence. It instantly adds protection without any complexity of hardware, since it's a cloud-based solution, and it can be deployed in a matter of minutes. So for our customers, the number one appealing thing about it is how simple its use and how effective it is. Second component is control. So there's an optional acceptable use policy that you can enforce at the DNS layer. So we have multiple categories, such as drugs, pornography, etc. If you want to enforce an acceptable use policy at the DNS layer, you can use our service for that. And finally, visibility. The challenge with monitoring DNS traffic is there's vast amount of it. Even a customer that has about a few hundred users, if you look at the daily DNS volume, it might be in the order of millions. So just the sheer volume of it makes it difficult to monitor. With this service, you can identify if there's any abnormal activity happening in your network. Let's say there are some IoT devices or some medical instruments. They are calling out during non-business hours to some external domains. With this service, you can find abnormal activity and take remediation steps. So with that, I'll quickly switch to the demo. So this is the Akamai control panel. We call it the Luna portal. which is control.akamai.com. All our customers get access to it, and they get a unique account set up. Here you will be able to provide access to your user base, your IT staff, and you have multiple levels of access, administrator level access, or read-only access. So first, I'll walk you through the configuration steps involved, and then show you the monitoring dashboards. So here, as you can see, I'm using a Akamai demo account for this. Here, there are 2 IP addresses. So these are unique IPs that we give for every customer. At the end of the configuration, you'll have to point your DNS traffic to these 2 IP addresses. These are IP Anycast IP addresses, and we currently have more than 60 points of presence across the world. So when your traffic comes out to this IP address, it'll connect to Akamai DNS server that's geographically close to you so that the performance will be good. So configuration, essentially start with locations and work your way through. Locations is where you configure your public IP address. If you have multiple campuses with different IP addresses, you can set them up as different locations and configure the specific IP addresses. You can configure the whole subnet blocks here. The next step, once you configure the location, is to configure the security policy. Here, what we have is 4 Akamai managed security lists. So first is malware, then phishing, command and control, and DNS exfiltration. And you can take different actions based on your requirement. We have 2 types for each category. One is known and other is suspected. So known domains, they're primarily built for the purpose of launching malware. And suspected domains may be domains that have been compromised. So you can take different actions if you want to. And we can also send email alerts based on the configuration to your IT team. So there are multiple actions we could take. We could block with the error page. An error page is a splash page where your end users will be redirected to a splash page showing a message saying, hey, we saw that you're going to a malicious domain and that's why it's been blocked. Or you could just monitor the traffic, or you could just allow them. Block sinkhole is an additional capability. I'll walk you through just in a couple of minutes what it does. Here's the proxy setting, essentially the second layer of protection. If customers want to enable it, you can turn it on here. And how you want us to classify the risky domains. Here's something which school districts will find beneficial. We have a safe search component. So when you turn this on, when your users go to either Google or Bing, it'll only return with child safe results. Same goes for YouTube. If you enforce a strict policy, only child safe videos will be returned from YouTube.
Ram?
Yeah?
Hi, this is Melinda. There's a question in the chat whether Akamai is managing all external DNS while we still host our own local DNS servers? Question mark.
That's correct. So Akamai will handle only the external ones which are out on the internet, and you can continue to manage your internal domains. We have a custom security tab where if you have specific blacklist or threat feeds that you purchase, you can inject them here and use it to manage from the Akamai service. Finally, we have an acceptable use policy. This is the optional component. We have multiple categories and subcategories, and you can block them at the DNS layer. It's a very efficient way of enforcing. We have more than 50 categories now, and we are constantly adding more to it. We have quick list. If you want us to, so we have both blacklist as well as whitelist. You can blacklist domains and IP addresses here, as well as whitelist them. Anything that you configure here, let's say you whitelist a specific domain. If Akamai classifies that as malicious, whatever you configure here will take higher priority. In quick list, you can configure up to 1,000 entries. In list, you can have up to 200,000 entries. It essentially serves the same purpose. The reason you would use quick list is, let's say one of your users wants to whitelist a domain quickly, so you can add it here. It will get updated in an entire platform in a matter of few seconds. Moving on to utilities, we have a few different capabilities here. The first one is client connector. So if you go back to the architecture, so we have protection for traffic coming from your network. What if your user is either traveling or working from home? In that case, you have option where we provide off-network protection. So we offer a thin client that you can install it in Windows and Mac machines. So no matter where the user is accessing the internet from, all the DNS queries will be proxied through Akamai and thereby offer protection. You also get a report on the total number of devices you have, what versions they're running, and you can also manage different versions. As we release new software, the IT admins can download and test it, and once they approve, you can do it on demand, where the user is free to upgrade the software whenever they want, or you, as IT admin, you could do a force upgrade where it automatically updates the versions in the endpoint. Currently, we support Windows and Mac. Very soon, we are going to extend it to Chromebooks, because we know a lot of school districts have users with Chromebooks. These are the error page, essentially the splash page functionality. You can customize it. You can upload your organization's logo, as well as if you want, you can enter the contact information such as email and phone number, and also enable a user to open a ticket. And we have different splash pages for different categories, such as phishing, acceptable use policy, etc. This is communication for the IT team. If there's any system issues or new software versions that are available, we can send you email updates on that. Schedule reports, we can do daily, weekly, or monthly reports. Email it to your IT staff, both from a total DNS viewpoint, as well as the different security events that we saw. Security connector. Due to the architecture, we by default see only a public IP address. Let's say you're seeing a lot of phishing requests going to a domain, and you want to see which endpoint in your network is sending these requests. In that case, we offer a security connector, which is a virtual machine that you can download from our portal and install it inside your network before the traffic goes out to the internet. So what happens? The systems that's going to the malicious domains get redirected to this security connector, which will collect the private IP address, date, time, and protocol, and then drop the traffic. So the security connector will report this data back to a portal, and from the portal, you'll be able to see the private IP address so you can take action. Certificates is for customers who want to use the proxy capability. because if you don't install it, end users will see a warning in their browser because traffic is flowing through our proxy platform. You can either download a certificate request from our portal and use your standard ways to distribute it to your end users' browsers. If you already have a certificate that you want us to use, which your end users trust, you can upload the certificate and we can use that in our proxy platform. Here you can see the deployment history. So what happens is once you complete the configuration, you go ahead and deploy it. Configuration will get pushed out to the Akamai platform in a couple of minutes. And then the first stage of testing is you could just point your computer to the IP address that you see here and make sure that the DNS is resolving. Then you can start to, if you have a Active Directory domain controller, it's likely currently pointing towards your ISP's DNS servers or Google's 8888 server. You have to go and update that configuration. You'll see it under a Resolvers tab and update it with this configuration and remove your existing resolvers. Once that happens, all traffic going through your network will be sent to Akamai. Then you can go ahead and either flip all your production traffic in one go to Akamai, or you could do it in a phased manner. You could start with your guest Wi-Fi traffic, and then once you're comfortable, you can send your more critical production traffic to our service. And then essentially you go live, and you will be able to monitor your traffic. It updates in a few minutes. You'll be able to see everything that's happening from a DNS standpoint. You can go back all the way up to the last 30 days. Here it will show you the total DNS threat events, HTTP threat events. These are the ones that go through the proxy. The total number of acceptable use policy events, as well as the total DNS activity in your network in that specific time frame. And you can also see the alerts that triggered. Here we have essentially like breakdown. The first one is DNS threats. You will be able to see the type of threat we saw, which location it came from, as well as the top domains. So here for demo, we are using Akamai test domains, but in real production network, you'll see actual malicious domains. You can click on the category and get more information on what that domain is, when the request came from. So here you can see that this domain is actually essentially happening around the clock. There's a few requests going, and there's a peak around a specific time frame. Here you can drill down and see what action was taken, which policy got applied. So it gives you more granular information. And the confidence level is known, and you can essentially click on here and get more information. What IP it resolved to, what's the domain, what category it was, what action was taken. And you can also see the IOC details. So this is information on what Akamai has in our threat database on the specific domain, like when we started tracking it, who it's registered to, so you can get additional information here. The domain information, the name servers it's resolved to, the registrant, as well as if the domain has only a few malicious URLs, you can see it here. The same IOC data, you can go to intelligence and pretty much enter any domain that you want to know. For example, to see what Akamai has in our threat research. So here it says CNN is not known to host any harmful content, and it's safe. So going back to monitoring, here you can see the acceptable use policy events. Even if you currently enforce acceptable use policy, let's say using your firewall, having it at the DNS layer essentially gives you two layers. So it will be harder for your users to bypass it and access sites.
Ram, this is Melinda. There's a couple questions that came up in the chat that I wanted to bring to your attention. The most recent one was how long folks would have access to the report information for web trafficking and security events.
So the question is how long you'll get access to the reports?
Yes.
Okay. So the real-time reports you can access in our portal all the way up to the last 30 days. And we'll be able to email you daily and weekly reports. So you'll have a PDF document on essentially throughout the year. And if you have a SIM tool or any tool that you use to aggregate logs and events, everything you see here, you can pull into your SIM. So we have APIs. It's based on the standard JSON APIs. You can pull every information you see in our dashboard, and you can also use APIs for configuration. Let's say you maintain a list, you can use APIs to update it. You don't have to necessarily log into our portal to make the configuration change. All the APIs are available in our site, developer.akamai.com. If you go under Enterprise Threat Protector, you'll have all the APIs and how to enable them. Melinda, do you have any other questions in the window?
Yes, there actually is a follow-up question on how the DNS works related to how schools would need to direct their content filters, primary DNS to Akamai, so that those options get DNS filtered and also functions with the content filtering that they're required to have.
Got it. So the way I understand the question is, how would this service work with existing content filtering that schools already have in place? We have customers who use content filtering either in their next generation firewall or like a secure web gateway. This can work in conjunction with it. Since DNS is at the beginning of the transaction, if we block a specific traffic, your content filtering servers will not see that. So we'll be able to block it even before it gets there. But if it goes through our service, it will then pass through content filtering. And if your content filtering service identifies it as malicious, you will be able to block it there. So it's essentially a layered defense and defense in depth.
Thank you. Dean, did that answer your question? You can just let me know in the chat. Thank you.
Going back to the dashboard, here you can see all the DNS activity, which categories it's going to, the top geo, and the volume of DNS traffic. Here you can see the proxy. So with proxy, you have vendors in the market who essentially offer a secure internet gateway service where they send all the traffic from your location through their proxy service, which adds latency and it's much more expensive. With this service, we are only going to proxy the suspicious and risky domains that are safe. If someone's going to youtube.com, we don't block that traffic and carry a bulk of the traffic through our proxy. So we are selective on which traffic we route through proxy, and we believe it's a much more efficient way of managing it. So here's network traffic. You can see the destination ports. Security connector is I covered this earlier, to get visibility into the endpoints. So here we see the request is coming from 10.00202, and you can click down, and you'll also be able to see the machine name. So it's a lot more easier to take remediation. You don't have to go sift through logs in your firewall and identify when the request came from, but this is totally optional. So that's the high level. Let me go to the chat and see if there's any unanswered questions.
I don't see any unanswered questions. Dean or John, if anyone has a question, please feel free to unmute and ask Ram, or post them in the chat and we will get to them.
I'm interested in the payload analysis that was mentioned early on. How does that work if it's only seeing DNS traffic? You mentioned analyzing PDFs and Word docs.
Yeah, so that's a good question. So if I go back here, the payload analysis is actually on the web traffic. It's not purely on DNS. If I walk you through the steps again, so traffic from your service, let me go here, goes through our DNS, recursive DNS platform, right? So if the domain is malicious at the DNS layer, we block it. If it's safe, we allow it through. But suspicious domains, we actually route it through our proxy. So not just the DNS traffic, the actual HTTP or HTTPS traffic from the end user goes through our cloud-based proxy, and we route it through internal multiple engines that look for malware. We do payload analysis. Essentially, we download the payload, we analyze it. If it's safe, then we route it back to the end user. Again, just to confirm, this is not happening on all the traffic, but this happens only for suspicious traffic. So does that answer your question?
It does. It brings up some questions about compliance. If a suspicious domain was actually good and had personal information, I'm not sure that we would want that analyzed, but that answers how it works.
Got it. So our service is compliant with PCI and everything you would expect from a cloud security service provider. And if there are certain sites you want us to not route through the proxy, you can whitelist them. So those are multiple options. And of course, if you're interested in testing it, so that'll be the best way to find how it impacts your environment.
So Ram, I know you brought this up, and one of the things that we had talked about in preparing for the demo is, and you mentioned it during the presentation, is incorporating a trial potentially on, say, a guest wireless network or something like that. Can you talk a little bit more about some of the trial scenarios that you all have worked with folks on?
Sure. So in fact, most of our customers who buy the service, they go through a see and try motion before they buy it to see if it's valuable to the organization. We support a free trial. You can sign up for a free 30-day trial. We will send you credentials for our portal with you can log into it, and you can essentially self-configure. If you need assistance, you can reach out to our team, and we'll walk you through the steps of configuring, testing, as well as turning it on. And what we find is at the end of like a couple of weeks, we see a ton of malicious traffic which customers didn't know existed, and they are able to take steps. If there's a severely compromised system, they could go take it off the network and take remediation. So customers who go through a trial, they do see the real value that it brings and how easy it's to operate.
Thank you. And I do want to mention that KanREN members are able to participate in the trials. If you're a non-member, then we'll connect you with Ram and the Akamai team, because that may look a little bit different. But connected and non-connected KanREN members can participate, and we set some of that up here at KanREN. So. Are there other questions that folks have about the features or how this works?
So I do see one question about directing the DNS traffic to Akamai. The question is, do you have to make configuration changes on each endpoint to send the traffic to Akamai, or you could use a central device to do that? So the answer is, if you have a Microsoft Active Directory or domain controller that forwards, which does the external DNS resolution, it's essentially just one place where you do it. So you open the domain controller, go to the resolver section, and update the Akamai IP addresses there, so you don't have to make changes in the endpoints. If you have a firewall, let's say a Palo Alto or a Fortinet, which routes all the DNS traffic and it's handling the resolution, you just have to change it in that one place. So you don't have to touch all your endpoints. So Melinda, back to you. I think those are all the questions I saw in the window.
Yes, thank you, Ram. Are there any other questions, folks? Feel free to unmute. You just hit the microphone.
So I do want to call out, there were questions about using the service in conjunction with your content filtering service. We do offer this service for many school districts, universities, and colleges. Some of them use Zscaler for their web filtering, and this works in conjunction with all those different services. So it doesn't replace anything. It essentially adds another layer of protection at the DNS layer.
Great, thank you, Ram. We are recording, and we will be posting the archive of this session on our YouTube channel at KanREN.net. So feel free to link from there. And Ram, if you don't mind, could you put the last slide back up? It has our contact information on there. If you have questions, if you'd like additional information about the service, or if you'd like for us to connect you with the Akamai team, just hit us up at info@KanREN.net, and we will put you on our trial, our 30-day trial list, or we will work with you on whatever that need may be. So we're glad to help you and answer any questions that you may have. Also, if you'd like pricing for your institution, those of you that are KanREN members know that is something that we pay close attention to in terms of whether it's a cost-effective solution or not. And you know us well enough to know that those are the kinds of things that we bring out to folks. So it is a cost-effective approach, and if you'd like pricing, just hit us up there. We appreciate you participating today, and we are excited to see what this service can do for you in protecting all of the end users in your institution. So thanks again for joining us, and hey, happy turkey, everyone.
Thank you all.